Yeah. And the next vehicle is once again a planned vehicle, as once again with the similar name as we talked about before. So what's this one about, Cacti? Just quickly looking through this one.
Well, I honestly don't know much about it. I think Soldier, I think you added this in. Do you know more about this?
Yes, I did. I found out about this one, and the odd thing about this one was that it was like mentioned almost nowhere, but it was fully specified out. It had like all specifications known to it, which I found just really odd. And for that exact reason, I think it's pretty fair, I guess, suppose, to add it, since we don't have to go like, what would it actually be like? We kind of know what it is like, just from the specifications it has. But yeah, it's a pretty standard attacker, I suppose. It has like 200 kilogram bombs. It had like one machine gun forward and one machine gun backward. So it's not that different from other designs, I suppose. It's not that whack.
Yeah, it looks like a standard aircraft. I mean, if I was going to compare it to another one, it has a similar design to the VB that you see in the French tree, apart from it doesn't have the two sets of engines, or at least it looks like it's designed with only one, so it could definitely work if they wanted, to put something like that in. So moving on to the next one, we have some Lockheed Hudsons. Are these similar to the ones that you find, once again, in the Chinese and the American tech tree, Cacti, or is there differences here made specifically for the Dutch?
Well, as you can see with the flag design, these are mostly American. So they are just pretty much the same as the other Hudsons. There's honestly not a whole lot to say here. We use these, and that's about it.
Yeah, the Hudson was one of those ones which seem to be used by pretty much every country out there, which is means it can be shared around a hell of a lot. So moving swiftly onto the next one, we have another premium aircraft in the form of another Fokker. So why are we making this one premium, Soldier? And also, what is different between this and some of the other naval aircraft that we've seen in the tech tree?
So as you can kind of see, we have three planes of the same type. We have the G, the C, and the M. And one of the differences was what type of material was used to build it. Either the C or the G variant was built like from wood and bit of metal maybe, and this one was just full metal, which was at the time like a new thing for Fokker to make actual metal planes. So this was one of the entry points to getting to all metal construction, and this would be well the first one, I suppose, in that regard. But yeah, besides that, it's pretty much the same as the other two, with the thing it being it's better in survivability, maybe a bit slower, obviously, which makes it a premium for Gaijin at least.
Yeah, increased weight, increased protection, but a little bit of decreased velocity. And now, looking at the event vehicle, we have a familiar face, because we actually already have a Ki-21 event vehicle in the game, which is kind of interesting. So why is the Ki-21 picked for the Dutch Cacti, and how does a Japanese aircraft end up in a Dutch tech tree?
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of people seem to forget that we also fought in the Dutch East Indies. So this is around Indonesia. So we were basically fighting on two fronts, you could say. We fought against the Germans and we fought against the Japanese. Of course, the Germans waffle stomped us and basically just annihilated us right away. But in Japan, our navy was actually able to do quite a lot of fighting. And at some point, a Ki-21 was either crash landed or had to land somewhere, and we captured one. I believe only one example was ever captured. But again, it's an interesting thing to add in. It's a Ki-21, something a lot of people, like you just said, you would not expect in a Dutch tech tree.
Yeah, it's a great conversation starter because you basically what happens is you say, "How the hell is this here?" And it's like, well, there's more to the answer than meets the eye, as what always seems to be with every single nation. Moving on, we have, I believe, our first Curtiss-Wright aircraft in the first fighter line. What's this one about, Soldier? How does Curtiss-Wright end up in this tech tree?
Well, the Dutch were a big fan of just buying aircraft from other nations, and one of them was this CW-22. It wasn't like, in terms of aircraft, it's not that great yet. The speed is alright, but it has like one machine gun in the front and one in the back, and 100-kilogram bomb. So it's not that great in that regard, but it's this ever so slight step from the previous, which is a slight step from the previous. The left line is quite interesting in that regard, that you upgrade like a bit every time, and this is one of those.
Yeah, that you just keep moving on and keep evolving, I suppose, which is something that we definitely see in other tech trees. How about this Hurricane? The Hurricane that unfortunately, so the Hurricane is one of my favorite vehicles of World War II. The reason for this is I think it's an unsung hero, very similar to the Halifax, with its implementation in the war, and how a lot of people overlook it for stuff like the Lancaster and the Spitfire. And it would always be nice to see more Hurricane versions and variants in the game. So how does this one come about, Cacti? Where does this vehicle come from, and how does it fit in the Dutch tech tree?
So when the Netherlands was conquered by the Germans, a lot of Dutch forces retreated back to Britain because they were close allies of us, and that actually started some Dutch squadrons inside the British military. And we basically used whatever aircraft they could give us. So later on in the tech tree, we'll see some Spitfires that we used, but also the Hurricane was also part of an aircraft that we used. So basically, in game, this one would just have British roundels and everything. It's just a British aircraft, but it were Dutch pilots that flew it. So there would be small insignias or small decals on the side that say, "Hey, it's a Dutch one." But other than that, it's pretty much exactly the same as your British Hurricane.
Yeah, it's very similar to a lot of other forces, such as the Free French or the Polish, who normally, what's kind of been nice is how, especially in the Battle of Britain, a lot of these forces were pressed into action, especially about halfway through the conflict. And the actual movie Battle of Britain did a really good job of going through the story, at least of the Polish. But it would be nice to see, more documentaries or more movies highlighting other nations' effect that they had on the war, fighting for other nations for their nation in a very patriotic way. So the next vehicle is another American one, the Douglas DB-8A. How does this fit in, Soldier, into the attacker heavy fighter line? What makes this either an attacker or a heavy fighter?
Well, that it is actually in the attack line is already quite a meme, I suppose, because at the time we got them, we didn't have the bombs anymore to equip them with. So there was an actual plan to use them as fighters, which they were obviously not meant to do, which was, pretty foolish thing to say. So it's quite unique, I guess, in the story part of it. Unless I'm mistaken, I don't think we have this plane in the game yet.
No, we don't.
And yeah, it's quite cool for its story, especially like having it in the attacker line without actually being an attacker in that regard. But yeah, I think it's pretty bog standard for the most part.
Yeah, it's a very simple aircraft, the Douglas DB, and we do actually have a DB in the game, but it's the DB3, obviously of Soviet descent, so completely different aircraft. And now we have the Consolidated Catalina. So what's the story behind this thing's name, Cacti? Because obviously I'm guessing it's just a standard Catalina.
Yeah, it's basically exactly a Catalina. The whole reason Consolidated is in there is we actually kept the manufacturer names in here as well to clarify things up. But basically, we Dutch, we were a big fan of the Catalina. But in this current version of the tech tree, we only have a single one. But in the future one, we're just gonna go crazy and we're gonna add all the Catalinas that we used. But basically, yeah, it's a Catalina. That's also why it's a premium. If you look at in-game, the Russians have a premium Catalina, the British have a premium Catalina, the US have the Catalinas on their own. I just think it's a nice little aircraft to add in as a premium.
Yeah, I agree. Like the Catalina is another one of these aircraft pretty much used by everybody, so putting them in separate tech trees, I think, is a general good idea. It's not a plane that's also that meta, so it's not going to take over the game too much, so that's always a positive. The next event vehicle is a Dornier, the DO-215. So is this under the same idea as the Ki-21 soldier, or is there a different reason why this is seen as an event vehicle?
So yeah, this one is a bit of a strange one. There were multiple times somebody higher up in the political side of things suggested we buy the Dornier 215, which is a 217 set, if I remember correctly. So it's an export version basically, or an export name. And like twice they said, no, we're not gonna do that. But later on, when the war was like practically starting, like Poland and stuff like that was gonna happen, they were like, yeah, but we do need this plane. So they tried to order these planes, and Germany was like, yeah, but we can't deliver them. We were at war. So it they were bought. They were like actually bought, but they couldn't be delivered anymore due to the war going on. So in that regard, it's quite an odd one.
So it just never made it into Dutch hands.
No, it did not enter like actual service. But from my point of view, it was like bought. So give it like an extra month or a year, and we would have had it. So it's not that far fetched, at least in my opinion. Plus, we do already have this plane in game.
Yeah, that makes sense. The next one is another crossover, the Brewster, and we'll actually do these two together, since of course you can see them all. So the B339s and the B439s. What is the story of these cacti? Are they similar to aircraft that we have in the game, or are they completely different and innovative compared to everything that we see?
Well, these Brewster aircraft, they are the Brewster Buffaloes, or the F2A Buffalo, which we have in the American tech trees. I think the whole reason why they have different names is because of exporting reasons. I might be wrong. Is that correct, Soldier?
Yes, they are export variants of the plane, and they were ever so slightly like different, different engines.
Yeah, but basically in the end, it's a Buffalo. Also an aircraft that you don't really see a whole lot in other nations, if I'm correct. I think might be wrong actually, but I think the Buffalo is a nice little. Well, it's a small little fighter plane, 450 cals on most of the variants. So again, it's part of the fighter line one, just as sort of a mixed pot where you just add in more foreign vehicles.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like the thing is, you are going to need foreign vehicles for these tech trees, unless you wanted to make them slightly smaller. And it's always up to it's always up to individuals depending on what they want to see. The next one is another Fokker, and we'll also once again do the Heinkel at the same time, since obviously these are in a little bit of space by themselves. What is this Fokker about? And also, Soldier, what is that flag behind the Fokker that we see?
Well, it's the Finnish variant of the D-21. They were quite a great consumer, I suppose, of them. They bought like one or two, and they also started making their own. They also did some like crazy experiments on them, trying to have it a retractable wheel section, and they also modified them in terms of guns, engines, and all that stuff. So there's like 3 different variants, I think, they could add to the Sweden/Finnish tech tree, which would be quite fun, and this would be one of them. But we did actually create like one example for the Finnish Air Force, and that one would be actually quite decently armed with like I think 2 20mm Orlikans and 2 machine guns. So that's quite cool. Also Finland actually equipped them with skis. That's also quite unique.
Yeah, that's one thing we don't see a lot in game. A lot of the ski fighters, like the early I-16s as well, obviously had the skis. That would be lovely to see. How about this Heinkel then? What's the history behind that?
Well, the Heinkel was. This is like a odd one, I suppose. This is one of those cases where I can see already a few people going like, "No, please don't edit." Um, it was one of the considered aircraft to be bought at the time. Like there were 4 different designs that were like, buy one of these basically, and it was like a Spitfire, I think, a Hurricane, this Heinkel, and the Bomber, the 215, and yeah, this was one of them. And now you might think like the E variant. I don't remember an E variant thing being a thing. Well, that was because to gain more attention, I suppose, to make it easier for the Dutch to buy it, Heinkel actually designed a specific variant for the Dutch. Like, oh, you're not agreeing with that one. Well, here's this specifically for you. But we did not order it, so that's the reason why I can sort of understand if people don't want it. Uh, the only difference, by the way, is the engine. It had like a better engine than the B and the A and the other version, the V, I think. So it's slightly different from the ones we have in game, but it's an odd one.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people will be kind of put off by the idea that it is one of these bought aircraft, but that, in my opinion, I'm not too bothered about it too much. It's for me, it's more about did they use them, and that would be the more off-putting part for me when it came to them. So the next set of vehicles are the Koolhoven FK-58s, and it looks like, once again, we have differences in engine for these ones. So what are these aircraft about, Cacti?
Well, the FK-58 is, I think you could say, the first sort of good Koolhoven fighter aircraft. This one is armed with 4 7.5mm FN Browning machine guns. But basically the differences in the engines were, well, we were basically testing them with all sort of engines, anything we had laying around. Something that Koolhoven did quite a lot was build their aircraft for export. So they were also using engines that the other nations were going to use. And that's basically where this all comes from. The Bristol Taurus has a different engine. The regular 58 has a Hispano engine. But basically, it's a nice little fighter.
It's a nice little fighter on top of a bunch of American ones that we've seen, which, in my opinion, would be a nice welcome change. Moving on to them, we have, of course, some coloured stuff, which is always entertaining, in the form of another Fokker D model. So what is this about? This looks very similar to what we saw earlier in the form of the prototype up here. So what's the difference between the prototype and what looks like some kind of production model, Soldier? How are these different in that case?
Well, these are, one of those what it would have been production variants, because as I said, it wouldn't have carried the water engines. Those were like considered too weak. and it only carried 2 machine guns at the prototype. This one would actually have the same 2 machine guns plus 2 13.2 Fabrique Nationale machine guns, which are, from what I've heard, really powerful, and we're probably gonna see them in the Swedish factory. So I'm looking forward to using those to kind of measure what this would look like. But yeah, it's just a different engine and 2 more machine guns. Quite powerful at that one, I've heard. So it would be quite an upgrade from the standard prototype variant. It is orange because obviously it just wasn't built. It kept at the one prototype. And there's 2 like different engines it could have carried.
Yeah, the Junker is very much a powerful engine, and obviously the Germans put a very high priority on it, along with stuff like the DB605. So seeing it being attached to anything really would, give it a hell of an oomph. And now we have the Grumman. You've got to love the TBM just because of its good old girth of its fuselage. So how does this Grumman fit in the tree, Cacti?
Well, basically, this is the TBM Avenger. We have it in the American tech tree. And this one is part of the naval line simply because, well, it's a naval aircraft. But honestly, we Dutch used it. That's basically why it's in here. I mean, why not add it in? And it's a wonderful little aircraft.
What is the difference between the 3E and the 3S?
I cannot safely say right now. I don't know if you know that, soldier.
I remember one having radar. I'm not sure if it was that one.
Radar? Bloody hell. That'd be interesting. But anyway, let's have a look at the next one. Another Fokker aircraft in the form of, I'm guessing the Wasp is related to the engine, and this, of course, is in the Attacker Heavy Fighter line again. So, what is this aircraft about, soldier? What makes it put in this line?
Yeah, the G.1 is probably the one people will look forward to, as seen like in the user model that was made. It carries quite a punch, and this one is no different, although it did carry different weaponry. The Wasp obviously, is about the actual engine in it. It carried twin Wasp engines, and the weaponry we're looking at 4 7.9s, 179 in the rear, in those like odd, that odd design you could see in that user model, and some even sources state that it had like 220s and 279s. So I'm not really sure about that one, but it also has like 400 kilogram bombs, which is not that big, but so this one was actually also the export variant. Like this one was actually meant to be exported to different countries. I think like Sweden was interested, Spain was interested in the G1, and maybe 1 or 2 other countries, but export actually just didn't happen. This aircraft was, I think, never ever exported. Being an export version and already made, the Dutch decided to use it anyway in their own Air Force compartment. So that's why we have this G1B.
Yeah, I definitely would agree that it would be really nice to see, especially with having a look at those user missions. If you want to have a look at the user missions made by ZiePeregrine, make sure to check them out. I'll stick them in the description just because it's really nice seeing the user models, and I've had a lot of fun with them, especially with the turret in the back, which is fully 360-degree available. The next set is the Fokker T.5, and you know what, we'll do these 2 together since they're all in red. So what's the story of these Fokker T.5s, Cacti, when we look at the 4 different models?
Well, if you look closely, the very last one from October 1947 is not in red. It is actually fully built. But the T5, the T5 is the aerial cruiser the Dutch came up with. So as a minor nation, the building a specific aircraft only for bombing can be a bit of an overkill, because you have a small industry. You need to make sure that everything you do, you're able to maintain it. So the aerial cruiser is basically an idea where you take a medium bomber and you give it armaments which allows it to shoot down other aircraft as well. And in this case, this thing has a 20mm solar fern anti-tank cannon in the nose, used by a gunner. So imagine that being loaded with HE, that will pack quite a punch. So basically, this aircraft could go on missions, bomb its targets, and when it came back, if it were to come across another bomber formation, it could engage it. That was the whole idea behind it. Now, all these different versions is basically the designing stages the T4, the T5 went through. And of course, the last one was eventually chosen and actually built and used during the war.
Yeah, so we can actually, out of the 4, at least have one of them in the game, if we stick to the current rules that are around in War Thunder. We have another Hawker Hurricane, Mark IIB. We're going to skip over this one because it is in the premium tech tree, and I'm guessing it has exactly the same story as the other one, right? Where it was used by the Dutch forces fighting overseas.
Yep, correct.
Yeah. And the Mark IIB is obviously in the game. It actually got a new model maybe about a year or 2 ago. Amazing aircraft, one of my favorite ones in the game. And now we have an odd machine, the Koolhoven FK 58 with a TB600. Okay, that's an interesting engine to put in it. What's this machine about, Soldier, and why is it in the event area?
Well, if we stick with the idea that this one can be in the game, this one would be the really odd one out there, because it obviously carried a completely different engine than the other variants, and it would actually carry, quite a powerful engine at that. I think it was actually, proposed to do it, and they designed the plane itself to accommodate for the engine. But it never got off the ground, and it just wasn't, built. So that's why it's still orange. But if we got this in game, it would be like the 85, just spiced up really a lot.
Yeah, giving it a bit more oomph, which is always fun. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyans Terry, Elove Goat, and Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.